What stopped you from committing suicide? My little sister. I, now 19, was at a really low place in freshman year. I had already tried to off myself a few times before, but I was dealing with some serious trauma within the family and had no one left to turn to. My sister was 7 and was at that annoying clingy state where she wouldn't leave me alone. One night when I decided I was going to do it, she knocked on my door and came barging in. She came in to ask me if I wanted to have a sleepover, and I said no, and that I was busy. Later that night I was writing out letters for each of my family members, and I got to my sister's and I though about how much this would kill her and she'd grow up without anyone to protect her. From there on forward I decided I had to keep her safe and I would keep living until she could get out of that house. I'm now in college for a degree in biology, and it is purely spite that has kept me alive. I've had a lot of rough patches since then, but I'm glad I stuck around to see the person she's become. I wrote a note and was planning how to go through with it. Something deep inside of me said not to. I didn't, then found out I was pregnant a few months later. I always wanted to be a mom, I always knew I would be. Knowing I wouldn't have gotten to experience it if I went through with it just makes me realize even more how precious life and time are. My daughter is beautiful, smart, and the best thing ever. I'm so glad I got to have her in my life, heart. Having a 7-year-old daughter to take care of. After my wife died I was ready to end it. But the responsibilities were either a blessing or a curse. I choose to see them as blessings. Knowing that how I felt was what my family would feel, and I couldn't do that to them. Not really anything, I just chickened out. But don't know how long I can continue being a chicken. My future kids. I love them already. The clothes I just ordered. I almost died, Brime, what stopped me? 3. JK, I had suicidal thoughts but never executed once, so I just think that dying by suicide is just the stupidest thing I could ever do. In other words, it's pride that is stopping me. It's not that I'm scared to die, it's just that I refuse to die in a stupid way like vehicular accident, extreme sports accident or suicide. I want to die protecting something I'm not sure myself. I don't fear death, I'm afraid at certain causes of my death. My grandmother. She caught me off guard during a suicide attempt. Since then, I didn't spoke to her about it, and I know she is fine with it. We spoke so free about life and death since this happened. I hope whatever you are struggling with, you find someone to talk to. You are not really alone. Be free to ask me about it. If not, have a good life, be free, be happy. Literally being a petty bitch. When my therapist said that my depression was my fault, and essentially encouraged my attempts, I attempted one last time, failed, and then said fuck that guy. Might seem silly, but my snail. I have kept giant African land snails since I was a kid, hit the lowest point ever a couple years ago and was about to off myself, walked past my snail tank on my way to the bathroom. He was out of his shell and fully looking around. Bent down to say bye, he lifted his little head up and it hit me. I can't leave this silly little fella behind. Cried and gave him a fat slice of sweet potato, he deserved it, slimy boy saved my life. My lifelong quest for existential dread. The thought of my wife finding my dead body with a big hole in my head. I really wanted to, and I wanted to make sure the job was done. I just couldn't stomach the thought of her finding me. I'm fine now. This was spring of 2020. I work in healthcare and was in grad school. Major situational anxiety, then I completely tore my plantar fascia. I was physically crippled and off work. The steroids they gave me really amped up the depression/impulsive thoughts. Go to therapy and hit the gym. My Reddit BF. Tried 4 times unsuccessful, each time got annoying and didn't feel worth it anymore. So I decided it was best to just live with the pain and say fuck it. I now live a pretty nice life with a stable job and an overwhelming sense of doom about the end of the world in about 2 to 50-ish years. I missed the feeling of selfishness and guilt for how others might feel. Especially my brother. He bottles everything up. I don't want him to suffer. My dog. Little guy had been bonded to me since he was adopted. Went into a slump after leaving my ex and he didn't understand what was wrong but tried to help anyway. Couldn't leave the little guy all alone when he wouldn't understand what had happened. My cats. I always have cats and a chunk of that is suicide prevention. Can't leave my cats. Guilt over my parents seeing a child die, my other family and friends too. But that ties into the other reason too, which is not knowing what happens when we die. That doubt of no knowing if I'll be saddled with the guilt of having hurt them after I've died is a powerful deterrent for me. If I knew without any doubts that there was nothing, that it just ends when we die, then I honestly don't know what I would do if I felt that way again. Guilt. I didn't want my kids to feel like they weren't worth me trying to make it. A friend of mine told me that his mother's suicide made him feel so worthless to her. Because having her around at her worst was a million times worse than not having her at all. I'll never be a perfect mom, but I'm still here to keep trying to be a good one. Now that my kids are older and we talk about real stuff, nothing was bad enough for me to have missed out all the good enough moments we get. Realizing how big God's love truly is. Wow, I love reading these. Honestly, nothing really specific or special stopped me. I didn't commit because I think deep down I had hope things would get better. I came back to my apartment with the intention of committing suicide one night but sat on my couch instead of going to the bathroom to get pills. I knew if I left the couch, I would get pills. So I didn't leave the couch. I fell asleep and the next morning, I woke up and felt like I could at least do another day. I'm glad I didn't get up. The fact firearms aren't readily available or easy to obtain in the UK, honestly the only thing holding me back. My favorite content creator saved me when I was 19. I was struggling with life a lot once I got my first apartment. I was far behind on rent and owed the bank almost £13,000. I was going to end it all and gave the little money I had to charity and my favorite creator. He saw the donation and helped me see sense. He contacted me personally and got me online therapy and showed me a butterfly effect I wouldn't have ever imagined. I wouldn't be around to enjoy it. I also prefer the idea of a reset rather than a hard shutdown. Not having the balls to do it / not being sure if it will kill me or just leave handicapped. I have nothing against handicapped people, but I prefer not being handicapped myself. I'd always tell myself I'll feel better in the morning and slept off the feeling. I told my online friend I was probably attempting suicide that night. He sent me cat videos. Literally saved by cat videos lol. Honestly? Will Wheaton. I was ready. I had my garden hose, my duct tape, and I was ready to drive to the park to break the Guinness record for world's longest nap. But I decided to watch some YouTube first. Will had been doing a series of videos at the time where he'd host various tabletop games and one of those popped up. I'm honestly not sure what really caught my eye at the time. I'd never been much of a Trekkie before then, and I really can't remember what the game was, but I watched it, and decided not to do it. At least not then. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't some magical event, I wasn't suddenly happy sunshine and rainbows, but I didn't feel quite as lonely as I had. Big fan of Will's, too, by now. He's a pretty great guy. That edgy Tumblr post way back in the day of the family member killing themselves and the family's point of view. To hurt family like that makes me nauseous. I know we don't say I love you enough, but love is shown in different ways. Loads up Arnold voice the Ice Age. My dream of helping people, my family and friends. There's a light at the end of the tunnel for all of us. My daughter. I want to see her grow up. That's the only reason, unfortunately. My friend asking me for some cash to buy nitrous, cash I would have otherwise spent on helium for an exit bag. I was walking to a parking garage with the intent to just fucking jump off the top when I was in college. It was probably 3 AM. On my way to the garage I passed this guy who was sitting on this bench on the phone with his mom. I could tell he had been crying and was basically saying how much he missed being home with his parents and how scary the real world was. The little bit of that convo that I overheard snapped me out of it and made me realize how much I'd miss my family, girlfriend, friends, etc., and how much they may miss me. I don't know who the guy was, but his struggle inadvertently saved my life that night. Anyone going through it, realize that suicide is like putting everyone you love in a room and walking in with a bomb and detonating it. You aren't the only one who loses their life. It's selfish. A co-worker told me he'd miss me while I was on vacation. Realized I made a difference in someone's life, and it was enough to keep going. Fear of death. Waiting for winds of winter.